What is up, my G-boys and T-boys? Toby Foster Memes here, and today we are reviewing the new Whitechapel album, The Valley. Now, Whitechapel are an American deathcore band who take their name from the London district of Whitechapel. And yeah, I know, Americans taking UK place names, very, very original. If you are at all familiar with this channel, you're probably aware that I have made 2 videos on 2 singles from this album. Let me just quickly summarise everything I said in those videos. A lot of deathcore fans don't like this little fucker.
Fucking magnets, how do they work?
All caught up? Good. Now, as I predicted in those 2 other videos, this album is not a pure deathcore album. It bounces between all different genres, from alt rock to alt metal to a bit of post-rock slash prog metal in there, and then back to metalcore and deathcore. There are deathcore songs on this record, such as Brimstone, which I wasn't a big fan of at first, but I've grown to appreciate it more within the context of this album. I really love that guttural growl that opens up this album. I meant to say, album. What? Fuck! Track instead of album back there. Okay. But speaking of opening this album, I really like the way they use their song "When a Demon Defiles a Witch" to open up this album. The song gives you the energy to listen through this entire album, while also showcasing everything you will experience throughout your listening journey of this record. It has screams, growls, clean sections, clean vocals, everything that is featured on this album. Blast beats, solos, they're all in this song. And I like it as it's a good opening track. This whole album explores a bit more about the feeling of psychosis that was discovered in When a Demon Defiles a Witch. It's definitely like an interesting listening experience, trying to figure out whose perspective the lyrics are coming from. Because this album is based on the true story of Phil Bozeman's, the vocalist's, life, based upon his mother who suffered from schizophrenia, his abusive stepdad, and Phil Bozeman himself. It's a very interesting experience to try and figure out which one of these 3 characters the story's coming from. The closest thing I can relate this to are the Silent Hill games, which are very symbolic and very psychological experiences. This album is also a symbolic psychological experience. This entire album has a sort of horror movie aesthetic, from the based on a true story tagline of this album. I guess it's a tagline, and I really do feel it's a lot of people call bands like Cannibal Corpse the horror movie equivalent of music, which I agree with to some extent. However, this Whitechapel album is the horror movie soundtrack of The Shining or The Sixth Sense, more like a psychological experience. The amount of times I'm saying psychological, Jesus Christ, this is why I should really write better scripts. The vocal performances are great, as always, as you'd expect from Phil Bozeman. I said this before, I love everything Phil Bozeman does on this album, from his shout of "Help me!" on the song Loveless, to his guttural growls and screams on the song Forgiveness is Weakness. I also really like the drums on this record. The production is very nice. Whitechapel brought in a session drummer, whose name I can't pronounce, I'm just going to leave it here, who also did the drums for Animals as Leaders. And he brings a lot of that proggy influence in there too. Sure, there are a lot of like skank beats, but there's also a lot of blast beats, a lot of interesting rhythms going on there, drum-wise. So big props on the drums. However, a few things I don't really like about this album. Mainly, there's a few teeny tiny mixing issues. On some sections of the album, guitars are slightly too loud. They should have been a bit quieter because they sort of muffle everything a bit too much. And I would also say that the track Other Side is my least favourite. It has much more of like a Amon Amarthi feel. I don't really like it. It's too murky when it needs to be less murky, and it's too clean when it needs to be less clean. And I also don't really like the chorus that's on this track. I just don't really like this album. Fuck! I don't really like this track that much. It's probably my favourite Whitechapel album to date. While I do love their unhinged brutality on their previous releases, such as This Is Exile, I feel like this is a much more of a powerful experience. It's much more unique and it's much more memorable than the past two records. This is the most unique I've ever seen Whitechapel be at. They've experimented with clean vocals on their previous record, which was Mark of the Blade, I think. See, that's how forgettable that album was. It had good songs on there, but I can't remember the fucking album name. Yeah, apart from that, this is definitely a red tie worthy album. Probably going to be one of my favourite records of the year, unless something comes up that tops that this album. I don't know. I don't know what album could possibly top this record. I don't know. What sort of Tool you need to review that album. I don't know, maybe a new Tool album. I don't fucking know what I'm doing.